Mike, obviously we got plenty of news going on here, and I want to go all the way around the league, but Rap Sheet just reported that the Commanders are hoping to get an interview with Brian Flores, the Vikings defensive coordinator. He might have a lot of different options, from head coach to staying in Minnesota to other defensive jobs. What do you think of Washington wanting to talk to Flores?
I'm not surprised by the possibility of a lateral move. Brian Flores and the Vikings tried to get a new contract done before the season. He decided not to do it. He decided to wait. I'm told the Vikings are confident he'll be back in Minnesota if he doesn't get a head coaching job. I'm somewhat surprised he's only been linked to one team so far. The Ravens plan to interview him. 7 other vacancies not yet connected to Flores. That scheme that he runs is so good, but, the reality is, number one, it didn't go well in Miami. It didn't end well in Miami. They loved him during his 1 year in Pittsburgh. There have been some rumblings about the Belichickian way and how it has manifested itself in Minnesota. Not everyone there loves that approach and that attitude. And the other wild card in all of this, even though legally it shouldn't be, he's got a lawsuit that has been hanging around for 4 years. It's still stuck at square one as to whether or not it's going to be resolved in court or in the NFL's secret rigged kangaroo court of arbitration. And I call it that because it is all of those things. That battle is right now in the early stages of a potential Supreme Court review. You're not supposed to consider those things when you're evaluating someone for a job, but as a practical matter, plenty of employers don't like it when there's someone, especially in a high-profile job like that, who has taken the entire operation and 4 teams to court. So that may be one of the reasons why he hasn't gotten more interest as a head coach. It's going to be very interesting, though, if he doesn't get a head coaching offer. Will he go back to Minnesota as defensive coordinator? He's essentially a free agent as a coordinator. And I know the Vikings, as of a couple of weeks ago, were concerned that the Cowboys would be the team to make the move. They haven't done so yet.
Very interesting. What makes you think he would be open to a lateral move? Is it just cash?
Well, I think it's more than cash. I think it's the opportunity to go to a place where you can pair that scheme, and he needs to have the right players.
Right.
But you can take that scheme that creates so much chaos and confusion. You never know who's rushing. You create mismatches. Guys drop out from what appears to be a blitz. The blockers don't know who to pick up. And if you can dupe a blocker into thinking you're coming and you don't, it neutralizes that blocker. It's one less guy who can pick up one of the guys who will end up pursuing the quarterback. And if you pair that with a better offensive situation, and it's hard to imagine Brian Flores not regarding Minnesota as an ideal offensive situation, but look at what happened this year. They made a horrible decision about quarterback for 2025. They went all in with an unproven guy who didn't play at all in his rookie season other than in the opening preseason game. They had journeyman backups. They didn't have a viable starter with real experience in recent years. Carson Wentz is the guy they picked up right before the start of the season, and it just didn't work. So if there's an option out there, and money is a factor, but I think if you see an opportunity to go somewhere and have the kind of performance that will make it impossible to consider the litigation or, the fact that, and this is true of so many of the guys who work for years with Belichick. They say, I'm going to be my own person. They don't realize how much of Belichick has kind of been tattooed onto their DNA as coaches, and it's just the way they coach. And that doesn't always go over well. But, you go to a team like the Cowboys where offensively it's not an issue. He provides them the possibility of putting together a defense that doesn't need to be the 85 Bears. It just needs to be a little bit better, and the Cowboys suddenly become a viable contender. So I could see him being attracted to a team that is likely to have a very potent offense and has enough pieces for him to do what he's been able to do so well in Minnesota.
You spoke about they're not supposed to think about the litigation and things like that, but the owners do. Do you think any chance that he may be thinking if the more teams he get into and people learn who he is and get a different opinion of him, then that's a better opportunity to get a head coaching job maybe later down the road?
I think you need to get more of these places where they'll talk about you the way that the Steelers talk about him. The Steelers absolutely love him, and I don't know what Mike Tomlin's going to do. It's not impossible. I can't imagine Mike Tomlin not coaching. He's been a coach every year since 1995. I can't imagine him walking away. But when he was asked last night about his future, he didn't do what he did 2 years ago. When he was asked about his contract after they lost to the Bills in the playoffs 2 years ago, he just walked away. He answered the question last night. He said he's not currently in a big picture mindset. If he would choose to step aside from the Steelers, I wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers, because they're the ones who broke from the trend. I thought when he filed that lawsuit, and one of the reasons why I believed a lawsuit like that would never be filed, you have to be prepared to surrender your coaching career forever if you take on the NFL and its 32 very closely held companies. I know they're all individually owned, but they're all under the same umbrella. It worked very well for him in Pittsburgh. They were brave enough to do it. They love him there. He just needs more of that on his resume, because the stuff in Miami, the way it went there, that's a check in the cons column. You need more checks in the pros column, and that would help. And it also helps to go somewhere and do incredibly well and build a groundswell that this guy has to be a head coach again.
It's going to be really interesting to watch the Brian Flores stuff. As far as what Washington has done already in promoting David Blau to their offensive coordinator role, parting ways with Cliff Kingsbury, what do you make of Washington? Granted, it's super early, but just of the moves in the coaching carousel so far.
Well, something had to happen, and I know that they like what Blau did when the quarterback's coach left for Stanford. He picked up a lot more duties, even though his title didn't change, and he's still fairly new in his coaching career. Something had to change after last season, and it was such a disappointment. This is the problem with coming in your first year and grossly exceeding expectations. And Jacksonville is going to deal with this next year. It sets a bar for the second year that may be unrealistic. And the Commanders struggled this year, and both coordinators gone. And look, these moves are going to be critical to whether or not the Commanders can start fast next year and avoid what's inevitable. If we have another season in 26 like the Commanders had in 25, Dan Quinn's going to be one of the guys that everyone's watching when the season ends and the pink slips start flying. I mean, we didn't think there were going to be that many this year, and there were 8. 25% of the league. So I think that they've got to make the right decisions and get the right people in there and get off to a fast start and hold it and be competitive. Not necessarily make the playoffs and win postseason games, but at least be in the mix when you get down to the final few weeks of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 5-12 was something nobody saw coming. I think if they landed at 8-9 or 9-8 and missed the playoffs, that'd be a very different conversation here in Washington. And I think, Mike, I'm curious if you see it this way, that Dan Quinn has put a lot of pressure on himself by getting rid of Cliff and then going with such a young guy. Like, I really like Blau. I think he's super smart, but it's entirely possible that this thing backfires. And I think that all lands on Quinn, if it does.
You're absolutely right. Look at where Nick Sirianni was 2 years ago when the Eagles, a year after going to the Super Bowl, they were 10-1. It fell apart down the stretch. They had one regular season win the rest of the way over the Giants. They got blown out by the Bucs 32-9 in the Monday night wild card game. And there was a couple of days where people were like, "What are they? Jeffrey Lurie really would he fire Nick Sirianni?" Well, what Sirianni had to do was go out and find 2 good coordinators to come in and turn things around, and it worked. Now, it wasn't as big of a risk. Kellen Moore was more accomplished, but it worked. And whoever the coordinators are, if it doesn't work, you're putting yourself at risk, and you're taking a hell of a chance with someone who comes in there unproven.
Talking with Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, NBC Sports. You can give him a follow at Pro Football Talk. Let's zoom out from Washington a little bit and just look at what is a crazy coaching carousel out there. I think when Harbaugh got fired in Baltimore, he kind of poured some gasoline on the fire here. Where do you think, let's start with Harbaugh. He's probably the number one candidate. Where do you think he ends up?
Well, he took the weekend and the rest of last week to plot what he's going to do by way of interviews. The Falcons came out and announced they had an interview with him on Monday. And then Giants executive Chris Mara, the brother of primary owner John Mara, told The Athletic last night that Chris Mara had an informal lunch meeting with Harbaugh for a couple of hours on Sunday. There's a lot of smoke right now about the Giants, and I don't know where Harbaugh ultimately goes. I know this, as one owner pointed out over the weekend to me, the situation with Harbaugh gives him the most leverage that any coach has had in decades. And he really, now how aggressively you're going to push it, I don't know, but you're in a position where you can ask for and get a lot, whether it's money, whether it's control over the roster, whether it's I want to bring in my own general manager, whatever it is, you're in a position to ask for a lot of things. And then the question is, will one of these owners be sufficiently desperate to get Harbaugh that they'll give him everything he asks for? But for now, the Giants are the team that everyone's watching. We'll see. And it may just be that another team that wants Harbaugh thinks the Giants are closing in, and all of a sudden, out comes the money. I think back to the Deshaun Watson pursuit from 4 years ago when the Texans set it up so there were 4 teams in competition for Watson. It was the Browns, the Saints, the Falcons, and the Panthers. And the Browns were the first one to get the tap on the shoulder that they were out, and they turned around and they made a ridiculous offer because they wanted to get Deshaun Watson. And look, it didn't go well, and the Browns had to answer to some of the other owners out there who didn't like the idea of a 5-year, $230 million fully guaranteed contract. But you get one of these owners who wants to win and wants to win that competition and wants to prove a point, you may have somebody dig deeper than they should to try to get Harbaugh away from the Giants.
Mike, as you look at all of the jobs that are open, which one you think is probably the sexiest, the best one out there?
Hey, Chris Sims and I argued about this last week because he thinks the Ravens job is extremely attractive. I don't know that following a guy who was there 18 years and won a Super Bowl, and you've got a quarterback who they are trying to get more out of. They're trying to connect with him in a way that it seems like Harbaugh wasn't able to, and I think the expectations are really high. I like the Tennessee job. They got a ton of cap space. I think Cam Ward can be special with the right coaching. They're going into a new stadium. The expectations are low. They had like an 80% attendance rate in their current stadium this year. I'd always want to go to a place where I think I can go out and sign the help that I need around a quarterback who has the potential to become a franchise quarterback with no legacy. They've never won a Super Bowl, even dating back to the days of the Houston Oilers. That franchise has never won a Super Bowl, and it would be an opportunity for me to create a legacy there, kind of like, not that he necessarily created the legacy in Baltimore because they had a Super Bowl from Brian Billick's days, but this is a chance to go in there and really, really do some great things and pave some ground that no one has ever been able to accomplish with that organization.
That Tennessee job's really interesting. They have a ton of cap space, 4 picks in the top one. I think their 4th is 101, so not in the top 100, but top 101, and 0 pressure. I also like Cam Ward. I think, where do you think Cliff Kingsbury ends up? Because I had heard him with Tennessee early on, like while he was still coaching in Washington.
It was weird because last year the window was kind of open for him. And, when the window opens, you never know when it's going to close.
True.
And look, here you are a year later. You're not even in the place where you were working that propped the window open. He was still getting head coaching money from the Cardinals for 2025, so there was no urgency to go out and make head coaching money because you're already making that money as part of your buyout from the Arizona job. I don't know that there's going to be an ideal fit for Cliff Kingsbury. When you go back and look at his history, we used to run this graphic on PFT Live whenever the Cardinals would inevitably have a decent start and then begin to fall apart. It goes all the way back to Texas Tech. Like every year his teams would start well and then the wheels would come off. And there was that question when he went to the Cardinals, does that Texas Tech offense work in the NFL? Is it a situation where after enough films out there about what you're doing, you're not scouting yourself enough to stay ahead of your own tendencies, nuances that really don't apply in college where it's just let's go get the best players and that'll carry us all the way through to the national championship if we get that far. The NFL level, there is so much more of a premium on the idea of your offense constantly evolving and changing and knowing your tendencies and breaking your own tendencies. And that was one of the criticisms when he was a head coach before. I mean, whoever is going to consider him needs to do a full dive on the things that caused his teams to start strong and finish not strong. And is that something that can be broken at some point if he gets another head coaching opportunity?
You said exactly what I said. I always say people have to self-scout. And I wonder if, since there's not such a thing in college football, do those guys who jump from college to the pros, do they suffer from that when they get to the NFL?
And I think that's a very real thing. And it's one of those nuances that there's never enough time or an opportunity to really dig into the specifics on how that works. But the best coaches know exactly what the other team has done all season long, and they know what they've done all season long, and they know when to use a formation in a certain down and distance, and the thing you've done out of that formation 10 times this year, this is the one time when the season's on the line, you're gonna do something else. I mean, a micro version of that is what the Bears did to the Packers the other night with the fake screen that they ran for the game-winning touchdown. They set it up earlier. They'd had that play in their back pocket for a few weeks, and they knew there was going to be an opportunity to break their tendency, and they did. And it was a touchdown to DJ Moore, and they won the game.
Talking with Mike Florio here on the Rude Guest Hotline. Rude makes the most reliable HVAC equipment in the DMV. You can give Mike a follow at Pro Football Talk. You can watch all his shows, everything on NBCSports.com. PFT is a freight train. What's so crazy about this time of year in the NFL is there's so much to discuss. We haven't even asked you about the games yet. Wildcard weekend was a huge success for the league. Almost all of the games were compelling until the end. What was the most impressive win or performance for you?
It had to be the Bears down 21-3.
Yeah.
And one of the best stories I heard really all year when Ben Johnson was explaining what happened after the Bears pulled out the victory. All the way back in training camp, he showed his players Super Bowl 51, the 28-3 comeback by the Patriots, and he has on the team a guy from the Falcons in Grady Jarrett and a guy from the Patriots in Joe Thuney. So they're there to talk about that this can happen, that you're never really out of it, and even if it's not going your way. And I love studying the demeanor, specifically of quarterbacks, because you can tell when they're in that kind of it's really not our night. And Caleb Williams is one of the few who can pivot from the facial expressions and the demeanor that makes us think, you know what, he's accepting it's not going to work out tonight, to finding a way to reverse it. And it may be all the way back to what Ben Johnson impressed upon them in training camp, that there is a way to dig out of this and create a kind of special moment that you can't unless you fall into the hole, right? You're never going to get a chance to dig out of the hole if you don't fall into the hole. So if you fall into the hole, let's go embrace the opportunity to dig out. And I don't think it's an accident when a team keeps doing it over and over again. Now, are you playing with fire? Yes. But so far, the Bears haven't gotten burned.
Yeah, it's what the Bears are doing is fascinating. And Caleb, in the same game, can show you why he's such a maddening player and why he has arguably the most potential of any quarterback in the NFL. I mean, some of the throws
that throw he made on 4th and 8.
Unbelievable.
It's one of those things where it happens so fast and the game keeps going. You've got more games, and I think as time goes by, people are going to go back to that and say, that may have been one of the greatest throws we've ever seen. In that moment, in that circumstance, season riding on it, 4th down, to roll to his left and make that throw and drop it in, it may be, and you don't want to get caught up in hyperbole and recency bias, but it may be one of the top 10 throws given the moment that we've ever seen in NFL postseason history.
I know it's early, but looking ahead here, you think any of these road teams could pull off a win in the division round? Oh,
I think the 49ers, even though they keep losing key players to injury, and now George Kittle's done for the year with that torn Achilles tendon. The 49ers, when the Rams were the team that seemed to be destined to be the 1 seed, I was saying, hey, this is fine as long as the Rams don't have to face the 49ers or the Seahawks in the playoffs, because they're not going to be intimidated by going in to play the 1 seed. They relish the opportunity. They know them. They go play in that stadium every year. And the 49ers just got held to 3 points by the Seahawks a couple of weeks ago. I think the Seahawks are going to have their work cut out for them, because from their perspective, we just manhandled this team. And you catch them flat-footed. They had a week off. The 49ers went to Philly and got a big win. They built a little confidence that way. I think that game Saturday night, or is it Saturday night or Saturday? I think it's Saturday night. That Saturday night game, that's got the potential to be a great, great game. And, if the Packers had held on to win the Bears, there's a way the dominoes fall that the Seahawks don't have to see either the 49ers or the Rams. Now they may have to face both of them in order to get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That could be a problem.
It's going to be another fun weekend of NFL games. Mike, thank you very much for your time.
Mike.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Mike Florio, great at what he does. Give him a follow at Pro Football Talk.